The original God of War came out on the PlayStation 2 in 2005, and I fucking hated it. Now, I've never played it, but my older sister's boyfriend had a copy, and whenever he'd come over, he'd pull out my copy of Spider-Man 3 or wherever the fuck I was playing, and just take over my PlayStation 2. One time, he didn't even reset the console or anything, he just pulled out the disc mid-game, like a fucking chode. And for that, I hated Kratos and everything he represented. Fuck God of War. Fuck it all. Fuck everything! But it's now 2020 and the newest God of War title has been on my radar for quite some time. It's God of War 4, baby. But naturally, Santa Monica titled it God of War again. Ah yes, this makes sense. People were hyped over this game since its announcement and it's still everywhere 2 years after its release. So I played it for myself to see if all the hoopla was worth it. And it is. It really is. God of War is what you get when you write an impressive story and you weave that alongside some damn good gameplay to make an experience. Not just a video game, an experience. The game seamlessly eases you in with this QuickTime event where I chop down a tree. I then take said tree back to my house with my son. And while this may seem inconsequential, the tree is actually for your wife's funeral. She handpicked everything she wanted to be used for her cremation, and so you and your son collect them all and burn her ashes. The two of you mourn, then you hunt, and then you kill an ugly ass troll. And then you're like, okay, I get it. This is gonna be a slow, dramatic story with the occasional action segment. You think you know everything. Then this lanky shitstick just yeets you across your own garden. I kick his ass, which is all fine and dandy, but now it's no longer safe at home. And now me and my son have to go to the tallest point in all of the 9 realms to scatter my wife's ashes. An hour and a half. All of this happens within 1 hour and 30 minutes. It is by far the quickest I've ever been completely and utterly sold on a game. You see, in most titles, you can totally separate the story from the gameplay and enjoy either or on its own. There's lots of people who put up with The Last of Us's gameplay solely for that great story. And I have a shitload of anime games that play like a dream, but I couldn't give a fuck about what's going on in their story. This is what I'm talking about. God of War has a sense of weight for the experience it's giving. The player starts the fucking game by chopping down the last tree alongside their son, all to bury their dead wife. To be entirely honest, in any other game, I wouldn't see this working all that well. Not just that fantastic opening, but just QuickTime events in general. Moments like this really annoy me. You give me a shitload of QuickTime events and I'm already having a bad time. But in God of War, it's earned. This is where we're going to talk about gameplay. I genuinely think that it's fair to say that I put the most amount of work into God of War's combat than any other game I've ever played. With other shit, I can read a million guides, change the difficulty, or just fucking cheese the game. Oh, and don't get me wrong, I still needed a guide for some parts of this godforsaken game. See what I did there? Ha! If you look at any of this gameplay and you just say, oh, that's easy, I can just smash the button. No, you fucking can't. God of War will rip open your urethra for that shit. Santa Monica Studios put a ton of work into fleshing out each and every enemy type, from attack strategies to giving them their own separate weaknesses. So, for an example, there's Revenants, who are witches who can summon nightmares, who are these little fucking gremlins who I just want to kick punt across the field. But you can only hit the witch after Atreus attacks them with his bow. And that moment of weakness isn't very long, so you're forced to stay on the defense and pay attention to animations for when you can go on the offense. And then there's Dark Elves, which are these pieces of shit who are constantly charging at you or blinding you, which forces you to get very, very comfortable with the dodge button. It's not just like other action games where enemy variety is a second thought. God of War tests you in every way imaginable, which sometimes also includes your patience. Yeah, you can spam Atreus' arrows because they're OP as fuck. And yes, sometimes I did die due to a cheap ass shot, but let's be honest here, most of these deaths were my fault. However, the biggest gripe that I do have with God of War's gameplay has to be the RPG-like leveling system. In most role-playing games, you earn XP by defeating enemies, finding collectibles, and completing missions. And after you collect a certain amount of said experience points, you get to level up. This opens new skills that can be obtained, upgrades to make your weapons stronger, as well as better armor. But God of War just flips this on its head. Instead of the standard system, upgrading your skills as well as the weapons and armor are completely separate. You still earn XP for playing the game, but now those points are used as a currency specifically for new skills, which isn't a bad idea. But what is a bad idea is tying Kratos' player level to the strength of his armor. Why? This means you now have to be constantly upgrading your armor and your weapons, as well as your son's armor and his weapon. But lots of times when you're upgrading, you'll be halted in your tracks because you need a specific item that you can't get until a certain point in the campaign. Not to even mention that health has no place in this whole shit show. That is its own thing as well. I mean, sure, you can add just a smidgen by having armor that ups your vitality, but to get a substantial upgrade to your health, you need to break open these special chests by destroying 3 seals near the general area of said chest. Sometimes these seals are really easy to find and you just throw your axe at it, but other times, it's a whole damn puzzle. Fuck that. I have other things to do, like, murder a fucking dragon? You need to open 3 of these chests to get 3 apples, and after you have said 3 apples, you get a substantial upgrade. I only collected 2 in my entire playthrough, and I ignored the rest. So, due to my lack of patience, I completed God of War with the default amount of health. Am I a madman? Maybe, but the way these mechanics are handled is just so sloppy. It's just a little irritating. Everything is segmented, which just makes it all hard to take in. And as a side effect to this, the pause menu is a hellscape. There's just so much cramped in here and it just makes me feel claustrophobic. Ugh. I understand that thanks to God of War's linearity in terms of missions, you can't be able to just let the player level up a bunch and just run through the game within seconds. The game wants to give you a sense of challenge regardless of what difficulty you're on. However, there's better ways to flesh out your mechanics besides taking them all apart and just leaving them on the workbench like this. Overall, the core gameplay is top tier, cream of the crop. The general moment-to-moment combat is not bogged down by this leveling system in the slightest, and for that, I'm grateful. But towards the 10-hour mark, the game does begin to feel like it's dragging just a hair. It's not a huge problem, nor is it due to the story itself. The narrative keeps you engaged not only due to its great characters, but also by constantly introducing new concepts and fleshing out the world. No, this feeling of a needlessly extensive length is mostly due to the amount of fucking fetch quests in this game, man. I'm okay with the Metroidvania elements in my games, where I can't do X and Y until I get the specific thing later in the story. I'm fine with that. That's cool. But I just feel like half of this game is just, oh no, Kratos, my dick broke. I need the ancient Viagra pill that Odin used to butt-fuck the entire 9 realms. And with this, and only this, we could finally walk up a really tall mountain. We need this to walk up a really tall mountain. Okay, mate, it's just that. Just rinse and repeat over and over and over. Of course, I'm over-exaggerating to an extent, but it happens so much where there's almost a disconnect. Almost. God of War's campaign, gameplay-wise, makes this narrative feel like it should be played over a long amount of time. Missions, especially in the latter half, rely on Kratos and Atreus going back and forth within mostly the same places. And after every mission, my piece of shit boy is telling me to go explore. Every fucking time. But narratively, there's an immediate goal. There is something we have to do. And even worse, there's people hunting us. Which is disappointing, because these issues mostly apply when the missions just revolve around some object we have to collect. When the game decides to really slow down, or even ramp up the energy to 11, that's when God of War has my 3000% attention. And thank God that those two kinds of moments come up to about 85% of the game. But the other 15% that's just lingering in the middle? Fucking A, man. Again, when the missions are strong, they're really good. Exploring new areas and learning new lore is interesting. Visiting the same place, again, isn't. Norse mythology is something that has never interested me on a historic level. However, certain works of media have found ways to interpret the mythology and make it really interesting, going beyond the basic fantasy aspect and honing in on what makes these tales so enthralling. The way that Santa Monica Studio weaves in Norse mythology, by introducing it through the lens of a personal story between a father and son, is spectacular. It's simultaneously a tone shift for the series, focusing on a new chapter in Kratos' life where he's being able to find some aspect of happiness, as well as a return to form, but with a twist, with Kratos killing his fair share of gods and monsters, but this time, it's all in self-defense. Kratos isn't a new man, but he is a different person. However, the eponymous character comes later. First, I want to start off with the rest of our cast of characters and their story, which, thankfully, is quite small. Nobody's trying to be here for 7 hours listening to me fucking ramble. That small cast also fits into the tone and setting of the story. Midgard is a desolate, too quiet, and dangerous place. And the game keeps this feeling intact by only having about 10 characters, with 2 of them being ghosts who haunt Kratos for only brief moments in the game. First off, the dwarves, Sindri and Brock. They're fine. I get that they're supposed to be funny, and they are the little lighthearted reprieve that you get from your dramatic story focusing on families. And even then, the dwarves themselves have a mini arc about hating each other and distancing themselves due to pride. But over time, they hint at how they're concerned for each other when talking to Kratos and Atreus, and this pays off when they reunite to make the key to Tyr's temple. It's a nice little arc that not only gives you a little breather in between the big moments of the game, but it also ties into the overall story. I initially fucking hated them, but just like Kratos, they grew on me over time. At first, I thought Baldur was going to be this random guy who we'd kill at the beginning, but then he'd be revealed as some secret lackey for Thor or whatever, and that's what starts the main conflict. Thankfully this time, my lack of knowledge of Norse mythology aided my experience. I had no clue what the hell was going to happen after Baldur sucker punched me to the other side of my house. But during the boss fight that ensued, I just had a feeling that Baldur was going to be one of my favorite parts of this game, and luckily I was right. For most of the story, it's assumed that Baldur is hunting down Kratos after figuring out about his godhood. However, it's revealed that Faye, Kratos' wife, was at the center of this conflict, as it's revealed that she is a giant, the wiped out race that the Aesir gods are hunting down, and thus, she was the one that Baldur was really looking for. And while after completing the game and replaying lots of it to get footage for this video, I absolutely loved the twist. But when I found out, my initial question was, if Kratos explained that he isn't the giant that he's hunting, would it all just end fine? But then after thinking about it for 5 seconds, not even thinking about how Atreus is half giant, they still wouldn't let Kratos go, because the Aesir are knuckin' futs, and I do mean that. Magni, Modi, and Baldur are constantly trying to kill not only Kratos, but Atreus specifically. You know, the child? Their former two are Thor's sons and are just killing for indulgence, almost like Kratos in his younger years. But Baldur has a reason to be insane. About halfway through the game, you find out that the witch in the woods is actually the Vanir goddess Freya, who married Odin to cease the Aesir-Vanir war, and together they had a son named Baldur. However, it was foretold that Baldur would die a needless death. So his mother put a curse on him where he can feel nothing, and I mean nothing. Pain, food, emotion, sex. Baldur is driven mad by his lack of emotion, and now he just serves his father alongside his brother and his nephews, doing his busy work. I was actually really worried that this character would just be evil, and that's it. But the thing I love about God of War, specifically when it comes to its characters, is that it treats them better than that. It's not just Kratos who has done some really bad shit. Everybody has that sense of duality. Baldur wasn't always mad. He was driven that way by having no emotion, having no way to get it back, and even worse, it was caused by the woman who birthed him. The final act of this story really cemented that this game took a lot of care. So in the climax, Baldur just punches the shit out of Atreus. And initially, Kratos, as well as the audience, believes that he's bleeding, but it's actually Baldur's blood. When punching the 10-year-old, he'd come in contact with mistletoe, the only weakness to his mother's unbreakable Vanir spell. Now, in the game itself, the weakness is never explained. Mimir just brushes it off as one of the downsides of Vanir magic, but in the mythology, this occurred solely because Baldur's mother believed that mistletoe was so inconsequential that she just ignored to make him invincible to it. The following fight with Baldur is one of the best final boss fights I've ever experienced in a game of all time, and now it's up there with Ansem Seeker of Darkness and Virgil from DMC5. And it's not just because it's exciting and fun to play, but because it adds on top of it the story of a father protecting his son and a mother protecting hers. It's saddening to kick Baldur's ass while his mother is screaming in agony for me to stop. But I also kinda slipped too far into the story, and it just felt good to kick the ass of the guy who's hurting my kid. Once the battle ends, Freya separates the both of them and says that she will literally let herself die by her son's hand, just to attempt to make up for her son's pain and bring him joy. And Baldur, being the sick fuck that he is, he takes her up on her offer. My stomach began to sink as I saw a good friend, and more importantly, a loving mother just trying to do what she thought was right, being murdered by her own evil fucking son. But then Kratos, dad of the fucking year, pulls Baldur away from his mother, tells him,
"The cycle ends here. Must be better than this,"
and snaps his neck. The tale of Baldur is almost like a tragic play. It's one where you know it can't possibly end with him forgiving his mom and the four of them all riding off in the sunset to go kick Odin in the dick. So when this happens, well, you kind of expected it, you still feel terrible. Maybe there's a little part of you that feels bad for the murderous maniac who had his emotions stripped away, but you mostly feel for his mother. Freya is especially interesting because she's evidence that there's way more to this new setting for God of War than it initially leads on. This character can do so much more than what she did in this game. And it's pretty obvious that her, Thor, and Odin are going to be our main adversaries, hopefully in the immediate sequel. Her loving nature towards our main characters is solely because she understands what it's like to have a son that you've alienated. Kratos was gone hunting all the time, leaving Faye and Atreus alone. Freya put a spell on Baldur that made him immune to everything. So maybe not the exact same thing? But to an extent, Freya was loving because the only thing she had left was her boy. There was always some part of her that wanted to see her boy again and make amends. But in a sad, twisted turn of events, the only way that Baldur would be happy is if he kills his mother himself. And as we stated earlier, Freya was completely willing to do that, which goes against everything that the other gods have represented in this series, even in this game, which is why when Kratos does the right thing, killing the sociopath and letting his mother live, she turns on him. Just like Baldur's tale, there was no situation where this could have ended well, and it's depressing. Freya was the only god who tried to help the two just outright. She was, in all intents and purposes, a friend. So when Freya mentions all the evil things that she'll do to Kratos right in front of his son and calls him a monster just like his sister did, it shatters my heart into a million pieces. But unlike earlier in the game, Kratos rejects the insult. Our main characters know that, in the grand scheme of things, what they did was right, no matter how sad it was. Is Freya gonna convince Odin to lift the curse so she can kill Kratos? I don't know. All I know is that this isn't the last we've seen of the goddess of love. Alright, let's talk about Atreus, the boy, also known as Loki. Atreus is a good kid who never really got to be truly close to his father due to Kratos always being away. So when Faye passed away, this forced the two to really rely on each other. However, this also caused a lot of underlying issues to come to light, like Atreus' feeling of being unwanted due to his father's lack of presence, his sickness, which is actually just the different parts of himself fighting each other, and his terrible, terrible temper, which he obviously gets from his father. Kratos does the best that he can to just put him on the right path throughout the entire game, but Atreus just keeps having outbursts. But the narrative is told in a way where Atreus, while flawed, he's still your kid. Just playing the story and just being around him, it just makes you want to protect your son, both in gameplay and in the story. When Atreus gets sick after the ambush from Modi, Kratos is initially just determined to get to the witch so she can help them. But over the course of traveling to Freya's home, Kratos becomes more worrisome and frantic, so much to the point where he starts banging down Freya's door and just screaming. Kratos is scared, and now the audience is scared. All of this is done to make you care about the boy. So when Atreus finds out that he's a god in the middle of the game and goes on this power trip, from insulting his father, disrespecting his mother, picking fights with monsters and gods, insulting Sindri and Brock, and even killing a defenseless Modi. You're less, when can we kick this little shit off a cliff? But more, young man, what did I tell you about killing people voiced by Nolan North? Real talk, just being honest. I've never said the words, I'm so disappointed in you to my TV in my entire life, but due to this game, I now have way too much for my liking. Atreus is too much like his father at a young age, and Kratos sees this. This is part of the reason why his true lineage was kept hidden from him. And yes, his son definitely regrets what he's done over the course of the game, which is all fine and dandy, but after that name reveal, we all have more questions. Will Atreus turn evil? Will he truly live up to becoming the god of mischief? I have no damn clue. It does seem as if there's going to be some sort of conflict in him, almost as if he'll become like the series' anti-hero of sorts. But it all has to do with that damn name. In Norse mythology, Loki is the one who causes Baldur's death by having, okay, how do I say his name?
Harder.
Yeah, nope, fuck that. Okay, so Loki coerces the blind son of Odin to exploit Baldur's weakness, killing him. It's said that Baldur's death is the catalyst for Ragnarok, and this is obviously where the series is going, both from it being mentioned throughout the game, and it just straight up beginning after the story. Fimbulwinter is the winter that lasts 3 summers long, and is a sign of the end times. It just starts immediately after Baldur's death. Okay, so Loki is at the center of Ragnarok, and he even births Jormungandr, aka the World Serpent. It's said that when Thor and the Serpent fought during the end of the world, Thor dies and the Serpent is sent back in time. Maybe that's why the Serpent is helping them. I'm not too sure. However, when it comes to the end of this story, Atreus begins to listen to his father and Kratos is trusted in him more. So while we have no clue if the story is going to follow the mythology to a T, or if God of War is going to have its own interpretation, all we know is that the end of someone or something is coming.
We're so close to the end now.
Yes. Yes, we are.
And finally, we've arrived at the big guy himself. Kratos has got to be the most sympathetic and enjoyable character I've seen in a very long time. From what I know of the original games, Kratos has had his fair share of loss and became the Ghost of Sparta, a representation of his loss, but most importantly, his vengeance and lust for blood. I highly recommend watching the documentary Raising Kratos. It's nothing but a love letter both to the team over at Santa Monica Studio, but also to the fans that made it happen. God of War 4's creative director Cory Barlog said it best. Kratos began life as an anti-hero at a time when anti-heroes in games were scarce. He was designed to be intensely unlikable, which made sense back in 2005, but after 3 mainline games, some members of the God of War team felt the character had run its course. They really did not like the character, they wanted a new character. It took a lot of convincing to make them think making Kratos a dad was a good idea. In every sense of the word, Kratos was killing God of War, and that was solely due to the series being stationary for 6 games. I'm not going to be one of those guys who says that Kratos never had any interesting aspects to his character. That's bullshit. Even with my general understanding of the series, I can understand why many players would like young Kratos. However, at some point, franchises need to evolve. Cory Barlog had a son. The former head of the studio, Shannon Studstill, has kids. Lots of the team from the original God of War have kids. Being a parent alters your worldview completely. The creators have changed, so their creation must also change for the better. And that's the entirety of Kratos' arc. Change for the better. It's the reason he doesn't tell Atreus about his true nature until halfway through the story. It's why Kratos doesn't mention anything about Zeus or Athena until way late in the game. And it's why Kratos kills Baldur. Moreover, Kratos is a person with empathy. While he may be stoic and serious towards everyone, he definitely has a heart. There's a million fucking moments I can hone in on, such as the moments when Kratos almost shows Atreus some sort of parental affection, but fails, only for spreading Faye's ashes to bring them the closest they've ever been. Or when Atreus accuses his father of having no emotion, saying that he's not mourning his mother, and Kratos snaps at him, explaining that just because they aren't processing Faye's death the exact same way, doesn't mean he doesn't miss her. The damn opening of the game, right after he fights Baldur, Kratos admits that Atreus isn't ready to go on the journey to scatter her ashes, but most importantly, neither is he. He literally says,
And neither am I. I do not know how to do this without you.
This is a new chapter for the Ghost of Sparta, one where that name is now a shadow that constantly follows him, a shadow that is guarded from his son from the very beginning of the game until the end in Jotunheim where their journey ends. Hey, this is a 25 fucking hour game, and I'm doing my best to explain why it's so damn good, but nothing can capture that besides just playing it for your damn self. Just do it. It's $10. I think God of War is a game that can only come around every few or so years. It's one that weaves all of its aspects together in a way that can captivate almost anybody. It's an experience that everybody should see for themselves. I know I say that for a lot of things, but I truly do mean it for God of War. To experience it, you need to play it. It is now, hands down, one of my favorite games of all time. And that's all I gotta say. I think that this is the biggest damn script I've ever made. Tell me if you like the longer videos for the channel. Maybe I'll do something like this again. Maybe. Anyways, have you played God of War? Did I get some aspect of the mythology wrong? Did I say something you disagree with? Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that jazz, and I'll catch you guys next week. Later, kids. Have a good night.